Welcome to the Probability Rules module of Elementary Statistics. In this module, you will learn 3 rules of probability: the subtraction rule, the multiplication rule, and the addition rule. Let's begin with the subtraction rule. The rule of subtraction states that the probability that an event A will occur is equal to 1 minus the probability that A will not occur, or 1 minus the complement of the probability of A. That is, P of A is equal to 1 minus the complement of P of A. Let's consider an example. Imagine that there is an election in which there are 3 political parties, each with a number of candidates running for each party. Only one candidate will be elected. The data shown on the page shows the probabilities of each candidate's election and which party each candidate is in. What is the probability that a candidate from Party 2 will be elected? The probability of a Party 2 candidate winning is the probability that any of candidates D, E, or F is elected, because these are the candidates that are part of Party 2. We don't know the probability that F is elected, so we cannot calculate this probability by simply adding up these 3 probabilities. From the rule of subtraction, we know that the probability of a candidate from Party 2 being elected is equal to 1 minus the complement of a candidate of Party 2 being elected. The complement of Party 2 candidate being elected is the probability that a Party 1 or Party 3 candidate is elected. That is, the probability that candidate A, B, C, G, or H is elected. The probability that A, B, C, G, or H is elected is equal to the sum of the probabilities of each of these individual candidates being elected, or 0.12 plus 0.09 plus 0.07 plus 0.11 plus 0.18. This is equal to 0.57. So there is a 57% probability that a candidate from Party 1 or Party 3 will be elected. By the subtraction rule, the probability that a member of Party 2 will be elected is equal to 1 minus this value, or 1 minus 0.57, which is equal to 0.43. Thus, the probability that a candidate from Party 2 will be elected is 43%. Now let's consider the multiplication rule. The rule of multiplication is used to determine the probability that both of events A and B will occur. In other words, the intersection of A and B. The rule of multiplication states that the probability of the joint occurrence of 2 events A and B is the product of the probability that event A occurs and the probability that event B occurs, given that A has occurred. That is, the probability of A and B occurring is equal to the probability of A times the probability of B given A. Let's consider an example. We're back to our election. In the election, there are 3 political parties, as you'll recall, each with a number of candidates running for each party. First, a candidate is elected president of the government, and then a second election is held for the vice president of the government. When a candidate is elected, the probability that the other candidates from his party will be elected doubles from its value in the first election. What is the probability that candidate F will be elected president and a candidate from Party 1 or Party 3 will be elected vice president? We know from the table above that the probability that F is elected president is 0.3. We also need to know the probability that 1 or 3 is elected for vice president, given that F has been elected for president. The product of these two will be the likelihood that candidate F will win and a candidate from Party 1 or 3 will be elected VP. From the problem statement, we know that the probability of D or E being elected to vice president doubles after F is elected. Thus, the probability of D or E given F for vice president is equal to 2 times the sum of the probabilities for candidate D and E, which is equal to 0.26, or 26%. By the subtraction rule, the probability of a candidate not from Party 2 being elected, given that candidate F has been elected, is equal to 1 minus the probability of candidate 2 being elected for a candidate from Party 2 being elected for vice president given F, or 1 minus 0.26, which is equal to 0.74. This is equal to the probability that a candidate from Party 1 or 3 will be elected. From the multiplication rule, if we multiply the probability that F is president and the probability that a candidate from party 1 or 3 is vice president, we will get the joint probability of both events. So, the joint probability of these two events is equal to 0.3, the probability that F becomes president, times 0.74, the probability that a candidate from party 1 or 2 will be elected vice president, given that F is elected president. This is equal to 0.22. So there's a 22% chance that both F will be elected president and a candidate from party 1 or candidate from party 3 will be elected vice president. Finally, let's consider the addition rule. The rule of addition states that the probability that at least one of events A and B occurring is the probability that event A occurs plus the probability that event B occurs minus the probability that both events will occur. Remember that the rule of multiplication is used to determine the probability that one of two events will occur. That is, that the union of the two events will occur. So we can substitute the rule of multiplication into the addition rule. Thus, the probability that at least one of event A and B occurs is equal to the probability of A plus the probability of B minus the probability of A times the probability of B given A. Let's look at an example. Imagine that you work at a pet shelter. The following are the probabilities that a person who visits the shelter will adopt a cat, dog, or both. What is the probability that someone who visits the shelter will adopt a pet? From the addition rule, the probability that a pet is adopted is equal to the probability of a cat being adopted, the probability of a dog being adopted, and the probability that a cat and a dog are adopted. So the probability that a pet is adopted is equal to 0.4 plus 0.12 minus 0.04, which is equal to 0.48. In summary, the subtraction, multiplication, and addition rules are shown here. You should copy these rules into a notebook and memorize them. It is important that you're able to use them very easily in order to solve most of the problems in elementary statistics. This concludes our module on elementary statistics probability rules. Welcome to the Probability Rules module of Elementary Statistics. In this module, you will learn 3 rules of probability: the subtraction rule, the multiplication rule, and the addition rule. Let's begin with the subtraction rule. The rule of subtraction states that the probability that an event A will occur is equal to 1 minus the probability that A will not occur, or 1 minus the complement of the probability of A. That is, P of A is equal to 1 minus the complement of P of A. Let's consider an example. Imagine that there's an election in which there are 3 political parties, each with a number of candidates running for each party. Only one candidate will be elected. The data shown on the page shows the probabilities of each candidate's election and which party each candidate